Emily was exhausted as she finished cleaning the large, luxurious home of her employer, Mr. Williams. At 23 years old, she had been working as a housekeeper for the 78-year-old millionaire for the past 2 years. It was demanding work, but the pay was decent and allowed her to support her ailing mother back home. Hello. Welcome. Enjoy, subscribe, and activate notifications. Emily's mother, Maria, had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer several months ago. The medical bills were piling up, and Emily was barely making enough money from her job to cover the treatments. She was grateful to have steady employment, but the situation was becoming increasingly dire. As Emily finished wiping down the kitchen countertops, she glanced around at the opulent home. The gleaming marble floors, the sparkling chandeliers, the sprawling artwork on the walls. It was a stark contrast to the tiny, run-down apartment where she and her mother lived. Mr. Williams surely wouldn't miss a few $1,000s to help with Maria's care. But Emily knew it wasn't her place to ask her employer for money, no matter how much she needed it. With a heavy sigh, Emily gathered her cleaning supplies and headed out to her beat-up old car. On the drive home, she couldn't stop thinking about her mother's worsening condition. The doctors had said the cancer was spreading rapidly, and the treatments were becoming less effective. Emily knew that if she didn't find a way to get more funding soon, her mother wouldn't survive much longer. When she arrived at their modest apartment, Emily found Maria resting on the couch, a pained expression on her face. "How are you feeling, Mama?" Emily asked, rushing to her mother's side. "Not good, Majida," Maria replied weakly. "The pain is getting worse. I'm worried the treatment isn't working anymore." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she gently stroked her mother's hand. "I know, Mama. I'm doing everything I can to pay for the best care, but the bills are so high. I don't know what else to do." Maria reached up to wipe a tear from Emily's cheek. "Don't worry about me, mi amor. I just want you to be happy and healthy. That's all that matters." Emily shook her head. "I can't just give up, Mama. I have to find a way to get you the treatment you need." That night, as Emily lay in bed, she found herself unable to sleep. She thought about her boss, Mr. Williams, and the lavish lifestyle he led. Surely he could afford to help with her mother's medical expenses. But the idea of asking him for money made her deeply uncomfortable. It felt like a betrayal of their professional relationship. Still, the thought wouldn't leave her mind. If she could just get a small loan from him, it might be enough to cover Maria's treatments for the next few months. That could buy them some time to figure out a more sustainable solution. The next day, as Emily was dusting the bookshelves in Mr. Williams' study, she mustered up the courage to speak to him. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams?" she said hesitantly. "I was wondering if I could speak to you about something important." The elderly man looked up from his newspaper and peered at Emily over the rim of his glasses. "Of course, my dear. What is it?" Emily took a deep breath. "Well, you see, my mother is very ill and the medical bills are becoming overwhelming. I was wondering if there was any way you could help me out with a small loan or something, just to get us through the next few months." Mr. Williams regarded her silently for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "I see. Your mother's health is important, of course, and you've been a loyal and hardworking employee. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement that would be mutually beneficial." Emily felt a knot form in the pit of her stomach. "What kind of arrangement did you have in mind, sir?" "Well, I couldn't simply give you a loan outright," Mr. Williams said, a small smile playing on his lips. "But I would be willing to provide financial assistance in exchange for a more personal relationship between us." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "You mean, you want me to be your girlfriend?" Mr. Williams nodded. "In a manner of speaking, yes. I find you to be a bright and attractive young woman, and I believe we could both derive a great deal of pleasure from such an arrangement." Emily felt her heart racing. On one hand, the thought of entering into a romantic relationship with her elderly employer made her deeply uncomfortable. It felt manipulative and wrong, even if it was for the sake of her mother's health. But on the other hand, Maria's condition was deteriorating quickly, and the medical bills were quickly depleting their meager savings. If she didn't find a way to get more money soon, her mother might not survive. I don't know what to say, Emily stammered. This is all so sudden, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable with Dash. Please, my dear, think it over. Mr. Williams interrupted, holding up a hand. I understand this is a difficult decision, but I assure you, I have nothing but the utmost respect and care for you. And the financial assistance I can provide could make a world of difference for your mother's care. Emily nodded slowly, her mind racing. Okay, I'll think about it. Thank you for considering this, Mr. Williams. As she returned to her cleaning duties, Emily felt a sense of conflicted turmoil. On one level, she was deeply uncomfortable with the idea of becoming romantically involved with her employer, especially one so much older than her. It felt manipulative and exploitative, and she worried that she would be betraying her own values and ethics. But on the other hand, the dire reality of her mother's declining health weighed heavily on her. The medical bills were draining their finances, and Emily knew that without a significant infusion of cash, Maria might not make it much longer. The thought of losing her mother was absolutely devastating, and the offer of financial assistance from Mr. Williams, while unsavory, could potentially save her life. Over the next several days, Emily found it increasingly difficult to focus on her work. Her mind was consumed by the moral dilemma she faced. She knew that accepting Mr. Williams' offer would be a betrayal of her principles, but the stakes were so high. How could she live with herself if she turned him down and her mother died as a result? One evening, as Emily was preparing dinner for herself and Maria, her mother could see the turmoil etched on her daughter's face. Majida, what's wrong? Maria asked gently. You seem troubled. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether she should share the details of her conversation with Mr. Williams. But ultimately, she decided that she needed her mother's input and guidance. Mama, Mr. Williams, he offered to help us financially, but there's a catch. Emily began, her voice shaking slightly. Maria's brow furrowed. What kind of catch, mi amor? He said he would give us the money to pay for your treatments, but he wants me to be his girlfriend in exchange, Emily confessed, tears welling up in her eyes. Maria's face fell, and she reached out to take her daughter's hand. Oh, Majida, I'm so sorry you're facing such a difficult decision. I know how much you value your integrity and independence. Emily nodded, the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. I don't know what to do, Mama. The money could save your life, but I just can't bring myself to enter into a relationship with him, even if it's just for show. It feels so wrong. Maria squeezed Emily's hand reassuringly. I understand, my dear. This is an impossible situation, and there's no easy answer. But I want you to know that I would never want you to sacrifice your own principles and dignity for my sake. Your well-being and happiness are what's most important to me. But Mama, I can't bear the thought of losing you, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. The treatments are so expensive, and we're running out of money. I don't know what else to do. Maria reached up to wipe the tears from Emily's face. Mi amor, I know this is hard, but you mustn't let your fear of losing me cloud your judgment. There may be other ways to find the money we need, even if they're not as straightforward. Have you considered speaking to a social worker or applying for any assistance programs? Emily shook her head. No, I haven't really thought about that. I was so focused on Mr. Williams' offer that I didn't consider any other options. Well, then that's what we'll do, Maria said firmly. We'll explore every possible avenue before even considering anything that would compromise your integrity. You're a strong, intelligent woman, Majida, and I have faith that you'll find a way through this. Emily nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Okay, Mama, I'll start looking into other resources tomorrow. And I promise, I won't accept Mr. Williams' offer without talking to you first. Maria smiled and pulled her daughter into a warm embrace. That's my girl. I love you, Emily, and I'm so proud of you. Over the next several weeks, Emily threw herself into researching and applying for various assistance programs and grants. She spoke to social workers, reached out to charitable organizations, and even set up a crowdfunding campaign online. It was a grueling and often frustrating process, but Emily refused to give up. Meanwhile, Mr. Williams continued to make subtle overtures, hinting at the financial assistance he was willing to provide if Emily would simply agree to be his girlfriend. But each time, she politely declined, citing her commitment to finding alternative solutions. One afternoon, as Emily was dusting the shelves in Mr. Williams' study, he approached her with a serious expression on his face. "My dear, I must speak with you about a matter of great importance," he said solemnly. Emily felt a knot of anxiety form in the pit of her stomach. "Of course, Mr. Williams. What is it?" "I've been keeping a close eye on your mother's condition, and I'm afraid the news is not good," he said, his voice tinged with genuine concern. "The doctors have told me that the treatments are no longer effective, and her time is running short." Emily felt her heart drop, and she had to steady herself against the bookshelf. "No, that can't be true. The doctors haven't said anything to us about that." Mr. Williams nodded gravely. "I'm afraid it is, and I want you to know that I'm still willing to provide the financial assistance you so desperately need, if you'll only reconsider my offer." Emily felt a surge of conflicting emotions: fear, desperation, and a deep sense of moral anguish. She knew that her mother's life was hanging in the balance, and that the money Mr. Williams was offering could potentially save her. But the thought of sacrificing her own dignity and independence, even for such a noble cause, felt like a betrayal of everything she believed in. I don't know what to say," Emily stammered, her voice trembling. "This is all happening so fast, and My dear, I understand your hesitation," Mr. Williams interrupted, his tone gentle but insistent. "But I assure you, I have nothing but the utmost respect and care for you, and the financial assistance I can provide could make all the difference in the world for your mother's well-being." Emily felt her resolve wavering. The thought of her mother's suffering and the possibility of losing her was almost more than she could bear, and Mr. Williams' offer, as unsavory as it was, represented a potential lifeline. I need to think about this," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just make a decision like this on the spot." Mr. Williams nodded understandingly. "Of course, my dear. Take all the time you need. But please don't wait too long. Your mother's condition is dire, and I fear there may not be much time left." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Emily alone with her tumultuous thoughts. That evening, as Emily sat at the kitchen table with Maria, she knew she had to share the devastating news. "Mama, Mr. Williams, he told me that the doctors have said your treatments are no longer working, and that you don't have much time left," she said, her voice trembling. Maria's eyes widened in shock, and she reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. "Oh, Majida, I'm so sorry. I had no idea things had become so dire." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "And Mr. Williams, he's still offering to help us financially, but only if I agree to be his girlfriend." Maria's expression darkened, and she squeezed Emily's hand tightly. "Mi amor, you mustn't even consider that. Your integrity and self-worth are far more important than any amount of money." "But Mama, I can't stand the thought of losing you," Emily cried. "The treatments are so expensive, and we're running out of options. What if this is the only way to save you?" Maria shook her head firmly. "No, Emily, I won't let you sacrifice your dignity and independence, even for my sake. There must be another way, and we'll find it, I promise." Emily wiped the tears from her face, but more kept coming. "I don't know what to do, Mama. I'm so afraid of losing you, but I just can't bring myself to accept Mr. Williams' offer. It feels so wrong, and I'm worried I'll end up hating myself for it." Maria reached across the table and grasped her daughter's hands in her own. "Mi amor, I know this is an impossible decision, but you must listen to your heart. Your values and principles are what make you the remarkable young woman you are. Don't let fear and desperation cloud your judgment." Emily nodded, her shoulders sagging with the weight of her anguish. "I know, Mama. I just wish there was an easy answer." "There rarely are easy answers in life, Majida," Maria said softly. "But I have faith that you will find the strength to do what is right, even if it's the most difficult path." For the next several days, Emily agonized over her decision. She knew that she couldn't in good conscience accept Mr. Williams' offer, no matter how desperate the situation. It would be a betrayal of everything she believed in, and she feared that she would never be able to forgive herself. But the thought of losing her mother was unbearable. Maria had been her rock, her constant source of love and support, and the idea of her slipping away was simply too much to bear. One evening, as Emily sat at her mother's bedside, holding her hand and watching the labored rise and fall of her chest, she made up her mind. "Mama, I've decided," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria opened her eyes and looked at her daughter with a weary smile. "What have you decided, mi amor?" Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she knew she... Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sure, Mama. I know it's the right thing to do, even if it means losing you. I love you more than anything, but I can't live with myself if I compromise my values. There has to be another way." Maria pulled Emily into a tight embrace, her own tears mingling with her daughter's. "Oh, Majida, I'm so proud of you. You've always had such a strong moral compass, and I wouldn't want it any other way." The next day, Emily approached Mr. Williams in his study, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mr. Williams, I've made my decision," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The elderly man looked up from his newspaper, a knowing expression on his face. "I see. And what have you decided, my dear?" Emily took a deep breath, steeling her resolve. "I can't accept your offer. I'm sorry, but I won't enter into a romantic relationship with you, even if it means saving my mother's life. My integrity and my principles are more important to me than any amount of money." Mr. Williams studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I see. That is a very noble decision, my dear. I admire your strength of character." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her, but the fear and uncertainty about her mother's fate still weighed heavily on her. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just hope I can find another way to help Mama." Mr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I may not be able to offer you the financial assistance you need, but perhaps I can be of some help in other ways. Please, let me know if there is anything else I can do to support you and your mother during this difficult time." Emily was taken aback by his sudden show of compassion. I don't know what to say. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll keep that in mind." As she left the study, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that she had stood her ground and upheld her principles, but also deep anxiety about the uncertain future for her and her mother. She knew that rejecting Mr. Williams' offer meant they were still facing a daunting financial challenge, and time was running out for Maria. That evening, as Emily sat at her mother's bedside, she confided in her the decision she had made. "Mama, I spoke to Mr. Williams today." Emily began, her voice trembling. "I told him that I couldn't accept his offer to be his girlfriend, no matter how much the money could have helped you." Maria reached out and grasped her daughter's hand, her eyes shining with pride. "Oh, Majida, I'm so proud of you. I know that must have been an agonizing decision, but you did the right thing." "But Mama, I'm so scared," Emily admitted, the tears welling up in her eyes. "The doctor said your treatments aren't working anymore, and I don't know how we're going to afford the care you need. I feel like I'm letting you down." Maria squeezed Emily's hand reassuringly. "No, mi amor, you could never let me down. You've always put your principles first, and that is something I will always admire about you." "But what are we going to do, Mama?" Emily asked, the desperation evident in her voice. "The bills are piling up, and I don't know where else to turn." Maria offered her daughter a weak smile. "We'll find a way, Majida. I know it won't be easy, but we'll get through this together, like we always have." Emily nodded, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "Okay, Mama, I trust you. I just wish there was more I could do to help." "You're doing the most important thing already, mi amor," Maria said softly. "You're here, by my side, and that means the world to me." In the days that followed, Emily redoubled her efforts to find alternative sources of financial assistance. She reached out to local charities, applied for every grant and program she could find, and even started a crowdfunding campaign online. But the medical bills continued to mount, and her desperation only grew. One afternoon, as Emily was dusting in Mr. Williams' study, the elderly man approached her. "My dear, I couldn't help but notice that you seem increasingly anxious and distressed," he said, his tone laced with genuine concern. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Emily hesitated, not wanting to burden her employer with her personal problems. But the weight of her situation was becoming too much to bear. "Well, sir, the truth is, the medical bills for my mother's care are becoming overwhelming, and I'm not sure how much longer we can keep up with the payments," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Williams nodded solemnly. "I see. And have you had any luck securing additional financial assistance from other sources?" Emily shook her head, fresh tears welling up in her eyes. "I've tried everything, but nothing seems to be enough. I'm afraid that without more help, Mama, she may not make it much longer." The elderly man regarded her with a thoughtful expression. "My dear, I know you've already made your position on my previous offer quite clear, but I want you to know that I still care deeply about your well-being and the well-being of your mother." Emily felt a knot of anxiety form in the pit of her stomach. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Williams?" "Well, I was thinking that perhaps there might be another way I could assist you, without the romantic entanglement that you find so objectionable," he said, his voice measured and careful. Emily felt a glimmer of hope, but she was also wary of any potential strings attached. "What did you have in mind, sir?" Mr. Williams smiled gently. "I would be more than happy to cover the entirety of your mother's medical expenses, as a gesture of goodwill and support. No strings attached, I assure you." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "But why would you do that? After I turned down your previous offer, I assumed you would be unwilling to help us." "My dear, I am a wealthy man, and I have the means to assist those in need," Mr. Williams explained. "And while I admit that I had hoped our relationship could have blossomed into something more, I respect your decision to maintain your principles. This is simply my way of showing my appreciation for your integrity and your dedication to your mother." Emily felt a surge of gratitude and relief, but also a lingering sense of unease. I don't know what to say. This is so generous, but I can't help but feel like there must be some catch." Mr. Williams shook his head. "There is no catch, my dear. I simply want to help you and your mother during this difficult time. No strings attached. Consider it a gift, if you will." Emily hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. On one hand, she was deeply uncomfortable with the idea of accepting such a large sum of money from her employer, even with no apparent strings attached. It felt like a betrayal of her principles, and she worried that she would always feel indebted to him. But on the other hand, the thought of her mother's suffering and the possibility of losing her was simply too much to bear. The medical bills were already draining their meager savings, and without a significant infusion of cash, Maria's chances of survival were slim. After a long, agonizing moment, Emily made her decision. "Thank you, Mr. Williams," she said, her voice trembling. I accept your offer. I don't know how I'll ever be able to repay you. The only thing I ask in return is that you continue to be the kind, principled young woman I've come to admire. That is more than enough." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her, but also a lingering sense of guilt and unease. She knew that accepting this kind of financial assistance from her employer could have complicated implications, but in the end, the well-being of her mother was the most important priority. As she returned to her cleaning duties, Emily couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would Mr. Williams continue to expect some kind of personal relationship from her, even if he claimed there were no strings attached? And how would this newfound financial support change the dynamic between them? These questions weighed heavily on Emily's mind, but for now, she pushed them aside, focused solely on the task of ensuring her mother's survival. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but with Mr. Williams' assistance, she had a glimmer of hope that they could weather the storm. That evening, as Emily sat at Maria's bedside, holding her hand and watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, she felt a sense of both relief and trepidation. Mama, Mr. Williams has agreed to cover all of your medical expenses, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria's eyes widened in surprise. What? But, Majida, I thought you had already turned down his offer. Emily nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. I know, Mama, but he came to me today and insisted that he wanted to help us, with no strings attached. I couldn't refuse, not when your health is in such jeopardy. Maria studied her daughter's face, a mix of concern and understanding in her expression. I see. And how do you feel about this, mi amor? Emily sighed, her shoulders sagging. I'm grateful, of course. This means you'll be able to get the care you need, and I won't have to worry about the bills anymore. But I can't help but feel uneasy. I don't want to feel indebted to him, or like I've somehow betrayed my principles. Maria squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly. I understand your concerns, Majida. This is a complex situation, and it's only natural to feel conflicted. But you must remember that your well-being and your mother's health are the most important things. Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, Mama. I wish there was another way, one that didn't involve accepting such a large sum of money from my employer. My dear, sometimes in life, we must make difficult choices, even if they don't align perfectly with our principles, Maria said gently. The important thing is that you've acted with integrity and compassion, and that you're doing everything in your power to ensure my well-being. Emily leaned forward and embraced her mother, the tears flowing freely down her cheeks. I just want you to be healthy and happy, Mama. I can't bear the thought of losing you. Maria stroked her daughter's hair, offering her a reassuring smile. And you won't, mi amor. As long as we have each other, we can weather any storm. Just promise me that you'll continue to be true to yourself, no matter what. Emily nodded, wiping the tears from her face. I promise, Mama. I'll always put my principles first, no matter what. In the weeks that followed, Emily's mother began to regain her strength, thanks to the comprehensive medical care that Mr. Williams' financial assistance had provided. The treatments were more effective, and Maria's condition began to improve steadily. However, Emily found herself increasingly uneasy about the arrangement. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was some hidden motive or expectation behind Mr. Williams' generosity, even though he had insisted that there were no strings attached. One afternoon, as Emily was dusting in the study, Mr. Williams approached her with a warm smile. My dear, I couldn't help but notice how much more at ease you've seemed lately, he said. I trust your mother's treatments are going well? Emily nodded, offering him a polite smile. Yes, sir, the treatments have been working wonders. I can't thank you enough for your generosity. Mr. Williams waved a hand dismissively. Nonsense, my dear. It's the least I could do. I'm simply glad to see your mother's health improving. Emily hesitated for a moment, then decided to voice the concerns that had been weighing on her mind. Sir, if I may, I've been wondering about the nature of our arrangement. I know you said there were no strings attached, but I can't help but feel like there must be some expectation or obligation on my part. The elderly man's expression softened, and he reached out to gently pat Emily's hand. My dear, I understand your hesitation, but I assure you my offer was made in good faith with no ulterior motives. I simply wanted to help you and your mother in your time of need. No strings attached. Emily nodded, but she couldn't quite shake the lingering doubt. I appreciate that, sir, but I can't help but worry that you might expect something in return, even if it's not explicitly stated. Mr. Williams sighed and leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in thought. I can certainly understand your concerns, my dear. The truth is, I do find you to be an exceptional young woman, and I would be lying if I said I didn't harbor certain feelings for you. Emily felt her heart sink, and she tensed up instinctively. Mr. Williams raised a hand, sensing her discomfort. However, I want you to know that I have no intention of pressuring you or making any demands. My offer of financial assistance was made with the sole purpose of helping you and your mother, without any expectation of a personal relationship. Emily regarded him skeptically, her mind racing. So you're saying that you don't expect me to To become romantically involved with you or anything like that? The elderly man shook his head. Absolutely not, my dear. I understand that such an arrangement would be deeply uncomfortable for you, and I have no desire to put you in that position. My only hope is that this assistance will provide you and your mother with the support you need, without any strings attached. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she still couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Williams, and I'm grateful for your help, but I hope you can understand why I might still be a bit wary of this whole situation. Mr. Williams nodded understandingly. Of course, my dear, I wouldn't expect anything less. All I ask is that you continue to be the principled, compassionate young woman that you are. That is more than enough for me. As Emily returned to her cleaning duties, she couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and trepidation. While she was relieved that Mr. Williams seemed to be sincere in his promise of no strings attached assistance, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to the story than he was letting on. Over the next several weeks, Emily continued to monitor her mother's progress closely. The treatments were working wonders, and Maria's health seemed to improve with each passing day. Emily knew that this was all thanks to Mr. Williams' generosity, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of obligation and unease. One evening, as Emily was preparing dinner, her mother joined her in the kitchen. "Majida, I've noticed that you've seemed a bit distracted lately," Maria said, her voice laced with concern. "Is everything all right?" Emily sighed and set down the knife she was using to chop vegetables. "Honestly, Mama, I'm not sure. I've been thinking a lot about Mr. Williams and his offer of financial assistance." Maria reached out and grasped her daughter's hand. "I see. What's been troubling you, mi amor?" I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this than he's letting on," Emily admitted, her brow furrowed in worry. "I know he said there are no strings attached, but I can't help but worry that he might be expecting something in return, even if it's not explicitly stated." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "I understand your concerns, Majida. It's a complex situation, to be sure, but perhaps it would be best to try and focus on the positives. The fact that his assistance has allowed you to get the care you need, and that it's helping to restore my health." Emily bit her lip, her gaze downcast. "I know, Mama, and I'm truly grateful for that. It's just, I worry that I'm somehow compromising my principles by accepting this help, even if there are no strings attached." Maria squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly. "My dear, I know how much your integrity means to you, but sometimes, in life, we must make difficult choices that don't align perfectly with our ideals. The important thing is that you've acted with honesty and compassion, and that you're doing everything in your power to ensure my well-being." Emily nodded, feeling a slight sense of relief. "You're right, Mama. I suppose I need to try and focus on the positive, rather than dwelling on the what-ifs." "Exactly, mi amor," Maria said, offering her daughter a warm smile. "We've weathered many storms together, and I have no doubt that we'll get through this one as well." Emily pulled her mother into a tight embrace, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "I love you, Mama, and I promise, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're taken care of." In the days that followed, Emily found herself gradually letting go of her lingering doubts and unease. She continued to monitor her mother's progress closely, and to her relief, Maria's health continued to improve steadily. The financial burden had been lifted, and she could focus on simply being there for her mother, without the constant worry about medical bills. But even as she allowed herself to feel a sense of gratitude and relief, Emily couldn't entirely shake the nagging feeling that there was more to Mr. Williams' generosity than he was letting on. She couldn't help but wonder if, at some point, he might expect something in return, even if it was something as simple as a deeper personal connection. One day, as Emily was dusting the bookshelves in the study, Mr. Williams approached her with a thoughtful expression. "My dear, I wonder if we might have a moment to speak," he said, his voice calm and measured. Emily felt a knot of anxiety form in the pit of her stomach, but she nodded politely. "Of course, Mr. Williams. What is it?" The elderly man settled into his chair, his gaze fixed on Emily. "I've been doing some thinking, and I've realized that I may have been a bit too cautious in my previous assurances to you. Emily felt her heart race, and she braced herself for the worst. What do you mean, sir? Mr. Williams sighed, his expression tinged with regret. The truth is, my dear, I do have certain feelings for you. Feelings that go beyond a simple employer-employee relationship. Emily felt a wave of dismay wash over her, and she had to resist the urge to turn and flee the room. I don't understand, sir. I thought you said there were no strings attached to your offer of assistance. And that remains true, my dear, Mr. Williams quickly interjected. I have no intention of demanding or expecting anything from you in return, but I feel it's important to be honest with you about the nature of my affections. Emily felt a surge of conflicting emotions, fear, disgust, and a deep sense of unease. Sir, I don't know what to say. I'm flattered by your affection, but I'm also deeply uncomfortable with this situation. I made my position clear from the beginning. I have no interest in a romantic or personal relationship with you. Mr. Williams nodded solemnly. I understand, my dear, and I want to reassure you that I have no intention of forcing or pressuring you into anything you're not comfortable with. My feelings for you are simply that my own personal feelings. They do not change the nature of our arrangement, or the fact that my financial assistance to you and your mother is completely unconditional. Emily felt a slight sense of relief, but the unease still lingered. I appreciate your honesty, sir, but I can't help but worry that there might be some hidden expectation or obligation on my part, even if you don't intend it that way. Mr. Williams shook his head. My dear, I can assure you that is not the case. My offer of assistance was made out of genuine compassion and a desire to help you and your mother, nothing more. I know that my feelings may complicate the situation, but I want you to know that you are under no obligation to reciprocate them. Your well-being and your mother's health are the only things that matter to me. Emily nodded, but the tension in her shoulders remained. I understand, sir, and I'm grateful for your continued support, but I must insist that we maintain a strictly professional relationship. I cannot and will not engage in anything more than that, no matter how you may feel about me. I respect your position, my dear, Mr. Williams said, his voice calm and understanding, and I give you my word that I will honor your wishes. Our arrangement will remain strictly professional, with no expectations or obligations on your part. Emily felt a slight sense of relief, but the lingering unease continued to weigh on her. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your understanding. As Emily returned to her duties, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and uncertainty. While Mr. Williams had assured her that there were no strings attached to his financial assistance, the revelation of his personal feelings for her had shaken her to the core. She knew that she needed to remain vigilant, to ensure that her mother's well-being wasn't compromised by this complicated situation. But the thought of having to constantly navigate the delicate balance between her principles and her family's needs was exhausting. That evening, as Emily sat by her mother's bedside, she confided in Maria about the conversation with Mr. Williams. Mama, I don't know what to do, Emily said, her voice trembling. Mr. Williams has admitted that he has feelings for me beyond just being my employer. Maria's eyes widened in surprise, and she reached out to grasp her daughter's hand. Oh, Majida, that is a very complex and troubling situation. How are you feeling about all this? Emily sighed, her shoulders sagging. I'm scared, Mama. I'm worried that his feelings might somehow affect the arrangement, even though he says there are no strings attached. I can't help but worry that he might expect something in return, even if it's not explicit. Maria nodded, her expression thoughtful. I can understand your concerns, mi amor. This is a very delicate situation, and it's natural for you to feel uneasy about it. I don't know what to do, Mama, Emily said, the desperation evident in her voice. I can't bear the thought of losing your care, but I also can't bring myself to engage in any kind of personal relationship with Mr. Williams, even if it's just to keep his financial support. Maria squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly. My dear, I know this is a difficult decision, but you must trust your instincts. Your principles and your integrity are what define you, and I would never want you to compromise them, no matter the circumstances. Emily felt a surge of relief at her mother's words. But Mama, what if his support is the only thing that keeps you alive? I can't bear the thought of losing you. I know, Majida, I know, Maria said, her voice soft and soothing. But there are always other ways, even if they're not immediately apparent. We've weathered many storms together, and I have no doubt that we'll find a way through this one as well. Emily nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Okay, Mama, I'll continue to be vigilant, and I'll make sure that Mr. Williams understands the boundaries of our relationship. But if I ever feel like he's crossing a line, or if his support becomes conditional in any way, I won't hesitate to walk away no matter the cost. Maria offered her daughter a proud smile. That's my girl. I know it won't be easy, but I have faith in you, mi amor. You've always been strong and principled, and I know you'll do what's right, no matter the consequences. Emily leaned in and embraced her mother, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and resolve. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to navigate it with her integrity intact, no matter what challenges arose. In the days that followed, Emily remained vigilant in her interactions with Mr. Williams, maintaining a strictly professional demeanor and ensuring that there were no further discussions about his personal feelings for her. She was polite and courteous, but made it clear that she had no intention of engaging in any kind of personal relationship. To her relief, Mr. Williams seemed to honor his word, and their arrangement continued to function smoothly, with no further complications. Emily's mother's health continued to improve, and she was able to receive the care she needed without the constant worry about the mounting bills. However, Emily couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. She knew that Mr. Williams' feelings for her were still present, even if he was keeping them in check, and she couldn't shake the fear that something might change, that he might eventually try to leverage his financial support to get closer to her. One afternoon, as Emily was dusting in the study, Mr. Williams approached her with a serious expression. "My dear, I wonder if we might have a moment to speak," he said, his voice grave. Emily felt a knot of anxiety form in the pit of her stomach, but she nodded politely. "Of course, sir. What is it?" Mr. Williams settled into his chair, his gaze fixed on Emily. "I've been doing some soul-searching, as it were, and I've come to a rather difficult realization." Emily braced herself, her heart racing. "What do you mean, sir?" The elderly man sighed heavily. "The truth is, my dear, that I can no longer in good conscience continue to provide financial assistance to you and your mother." Emily felt her stomach drop, and she had to resist the urge to panic. But why, sir? I thought you said there were no strings attached to your offer." Mr. Williams shook his head, his expression solemn. "I know, and I meant that sincerely at the time. But the reality is, my feelings for you have only grown stronger, and I can no longer separate my personal desires from the professional arrangement we've had." Emily felt a wave of dismay wash over her, and she had to fight back the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes. So you're saying that you're going to cut off our financial support unless I engage in some kind of personal relationship with you? The elderly man shook his head quickly. "No, my dear, that's not what I'm saying at all. I would never dream of forcing you into something you're so clearly uncomfortable with. No, the truth is, I've realized that continuing to provide this assistance would be a betrayal of my own principles." Emily stared at him, confusion and fear etched on her face. I don't understand, sir. How is this a betrayal of your principles?" Mr. Williams sighed heavily. "My dear, I've come to the realization that my feelings for you have clouded my judgment, and that my continued financial support of you and your mother has become tainted, in a sense, by those feelings. I can no longer be certain that my actions are truly motivated by altruism and a desire to help, rather than by my own selfish desires." Emily felt a surge of panic, her mind racing. "But Mama's health. The treatments are working and she's getting better. Please, sir, you can't just cut us off like this. We have no other way to afford the care she needs." The elderly man reached out and placed a hand on Emily's arm, his expression tinged with regret. I know, my dear, and I'm truly sorry, but I simply cannot continue down this path. It wouldn't be right for either of us. Emily felt the tears welling up in her eyes, and she had to fight the urge to lash out in anger and desperation. So what are we supposed to do, then? How are we supposed to afford Mama's care? Mr. Williams offered her a sympathetic look. I'm afraid I don't have a solution for that, my dear. I can only hope that you and your mother will find a way to manage, through your own means or with the help of others. Emily felt a surge of panic and desperation, but she knew that arguing or pleading wouldn't change Mr. Williams' mind. He had made his decision, and she could do nothing to stop it. I understand, sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll let my mother know about this. Mr. Williams nodded solemnly. I truly am sorry, my dear. I wish things could be different, but I must follow my conscience on this matter. As Emily turned to leave the study, she couldn't help but feel a sense of overwhelming dread and fear. Without Mr. Williams' financial support, she and her mother would be in dire straits, with no clear path forward. The drive home was a blur, as Emily's mind raced with 1,000 different thoughts and worries. How would they afford Maria's treatments? What if her condition deteriorated again? The uncertainty was paralyzing, and she could feel the panic rising within her. When she finally reached their small apartment, Emily found her mother waiting for her, a concerned expression on her face. Majida, what's wrong? Maria asked, her voice laced with worry. You look like you've seen a ghost. Emily felt the tears welling up in her eyes, and she rushed into her mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Mama, I don't know what to do, she cried, her voice muffled by Maria's embrace. Mr. Williams? He's cutting off our financial support. Maria's eyes widened in shock, and she tightened her hold on her daughter. What? But why, Majida? I thought he said there were no strings attached. Emily pulled back, her face streaked with tears. He said that his feelings for me have become too much, and that he can no longer in good conscience continue to help us. He said it would be a betrayal of his own principles. Emily nodded, her shoulders shaking. I don't know what we're going to do, Mama. Without his financial support, I don't know how we're going to afford your treatments. I'm so scared. Maria pulled her daughter close once more, stroking her hair soothingly. Sure, Majida, it's going to be all right. We'll figure this out, I promise. We've been through tough times before, and we'll get through this too. Emily clung to her mother, the fear and uncertainty threatening to overwhelm her. But Mama, I can't bear the thought of losing you. I can't imagine life without you. I know, mi amor, I know, Maria soothed, her voice steady and reassuring. But we mustn't lose hope. There are always other ways, even if they're not immediately apparent. Emily nodded, sniffling softly. Okay, Mama, I trust you. I don't know what we're going to do. Maria offered her daughter a gentle smile. We'll take it one day at a time, Majida. And no matter what, we'll face it together, as we always have. As the sun set outside their small apartment, Emily and Maria clung to each other, their hearts heavy with uncertainty and fear. But in the darkness, they found the strength to continue, driven by their unwavering love and determination to weather the storm.